Have you ever eaten a raw clove of garlic? Just chewed on it, put it in your mouth, tried to eat it. I love garlic. I'm going to use 3 cloves of it if the recipe calls for 1. Eating it raw just isn't the same thing. And a lot of things we love in life, it's like that. You got to know how to appreciate things. Things deserve their proper setting, their proper treatments, right? Especially the things that we love, the things that deserve to be appreciated the right way. Garlic being one of those things, right? So I've had this idea to do a podcast for 6 years, and I've done little things here and there. And one of the things that's been taking me so long is when I sat down to actually do this podcast, I realized I had a certain taste in my mouth. I'd kind of been chewing on something that maybe it was a little too much. You know what I'm saying? The Great Rehumanization. Now, I like the title. Like, I love garlic. But, man, something about it. We're going to talk about it. This is the Great Rehumanization. We're talking about naming the podcast, naming the problem. It's going to be fun. Ready to do this. Thanks for joining me. About what's taken so long, Martin, man. Why have you been talking about and teasing this podcast for 6 years now? And it's called the Great Rehumanization, buddy. Yeah, I'm talking to myself. Yeah, so 6 years, and I call it the Great Rehumanization, and that's funny, man, because it's supposed to be urgent. It's supposed to sound urgent, and here I am, super procrastination, wearing a cape. It's hilarious, man. And it is kind of funny, the whole thing, the name, the Great Rehumanization. And that's what I mean by, like, chewing on a whole clove of garlic. It's like, I was pretty excited about this name. And then, all of a sudden, I realized, just as I'm really getting into it, that it's grandiose. It's pretentious. It's really kind of corny. And every time I, sat down, started talking into a microphone, I felt like I had to give like a TED talk, a pep talk. I had to just really lean into this influencer, complex that the influencer industrial complex, man. Yeah, so this name, the Great Rehumanization, has been sitting in my mouth like this rancid clove of garlic, right? It's like 6 years. So in November 2019, I jumped out of bed, literally. I was like, that's it. That's the name of the podcast. But it's felt a little nauseating, like just the rhetorical weight, the implications involved in carrying around such a name. And then I spell it with the capital H, rehumanization, right? In 6 years, man, something's supposed to sound so urgent. And that was the whole point. I wanted it to sound urgent and exciting and like everybody can get on board with some type of movement here, like we're doing something really, really, really important. And what is that? I wanted to address just dehumanization, the problem of dehumanization from the top down, from our private lives into the public sphere, because I really think there's a direct line between from our trauma, our interpersonal traumas, our deep brokenness, and the trouble and turmoil we see in the world, of course, right? And I really want to dig into that. But this pretentious, corny, like evangelical sounding, TED Talky, influencer friendly type name, the Great Rehumanization, it conjures this image of internet gurus out there, the internet gurus selling all this packaged enlightenment. And that's what it seems like to me, like this spiritualism. It's like, hey, buddy, that's not spirituality. That's spiritualism. It's something I talk about, something I need to talk about. But here I am. And it's like I'm going to be giving you some testimonials about manifesting, which is exactly what I don't want to do. And if you see like irony sitting down at my dinner table, eating my dinner, licking my plate, And you're like, whoa, that's ironic, Martin. Look at that, buddy. I get it. There's going to be a tension here, a paradox. I feel like I'm going to be forced to perform the same moves that the influencers out there in that guru sphere are performing. Have you ever heard of, speaking of the guru sphere, there's an awesome podcast out there called Decoding the Gurus. And long and short of it, I don't know if I want to end up on Decoding the Gurus with, I think their names are Matt and Chris, the hosts. Matt and Chris, I don't know if I want them like laughing at me and well, maybe I do. Yes. Yeah, I kind of do. Yeah, right. Of course I do. Anyway, Decoding the Gurus. It's this podcast where these two guys, they're academics. I think one is Irish for sure. The other guy I think is Australian or something, maybe from New Zealand. But these dudes, they shine a ludicrous light basically on the podcasters that constellate this constellation of heterodox counterculture podcasters out there, right? Joe Rogan is like the king. We love Joe, right? And then all the rest of these guys are just kind of like, you'll see them on Rogan, but they're on each other's podcasts all the time, and they get into these feuds. They have arguments and debates about. You've probably seen a lot. Jordan Peterson is one of them. He's one of the really big ones out there in the guru sphere. But like Decoding the Gurus. Anyway, they kind of. I like those guys, and I know what they're talking about. It's really funny sometimes when we get out into that space. What else do they call it? The intellectual dark web, right? Yeah, I don't know how much I want to be a part of that, is what I'm saying. You know what I mean? I'm afraid the title, The Great Rehumanization, is just going to collapse into the worst possible caricature of all of that stuff, right? I don't want it to be propagating the slop out there. Not that all that stuff in the guru sphere is slop. I like a lot of it. I really do. Even some Jordan Peterson stuff, like, Jordan. I'd hang out with you, Jordan. I kid. But really, seriously, I want to dig into the real stuff. But there is a probability that I'm going to sound like one of these niche influencers out there, right? The name has been holding me back. Been like this albatross around my neck. And I have had a hard time just getting moving, just because I've been in this tension of what is going on here. How am I going to do this without sounding like I'm stepping up into the pulpit every time and giving this sermon? I don't want it to teeter in that direction, right? Self-help scaffolding. I don't want to sell salvation and, a spiritual marketplace, trading an easy uplift, that kind of stuff. So I got the ick. The name gave me the ick. The whole idea of grand fixes and smiling into a mic and selling packaged compassion and ending up on an episode of Decoding the Gurus. The other part of all of this is really my personal stuff. And the personal stuff is really important to talk about. I want to be really clear. Okay, so I'll be upfront and honest about everything from being diagnosed bipolar. I've got stuff coming up where I talk about my trauma, PTSD. Life has been a string of betrayals by my own wiring. I'm about to talk about that, like how we have, of course, used a lot of our metaphors and our language to describe our world, including our own physical and spiritual condition. We use this technological language, right? But my wiring doesn't seem to plug into the system. Do you know what I'm saying? Do you feel that? All right, so anyone who knows me knows that I've got so many issues. I'm sort of functional. We're going to get into all that. But I have a tendency to overproduce. I wish. That's the opposite. I have a tendency to underproduce and overpromise. And so many of us have that problem. Do you relate to that? So on the one hand, the name of this podcast has been this burden that I've been carrying around. It's just corny. It's funny. It's clumsy. And on the other hand, I've had 6 years worth of the stuff I've been going through. that holds me back. The mental health issues, spiritual health issues, just real physical, the physical components of the trauma and PTSD and how all that works in the body. All that complicates everything. And that's a story, and that's something that many people can relate to. And many people can relate to just wrestling with our attention spans out there. You know? For me, I'm in the grapple hold of like hyperfocus, or the need to hyperfocus anyway. Like I have such a longing for deep, reflective, creative alone time. Do you know what I mean? I mean, who I am, I'm an artist, I'm a creator, I'm a writer, a thinker, and I read, and that's just who I am, and that's what I'm drawn to. So I'm really good at concentrating on things that have that intrinsic value, that give me that stimulation and that reward my soul in that way. And I believe those are the gifts that God gave me. The ability to integrate information, to have the patience to comprehend and read text that maybe is hard at first, to work my way through things like that. I've always had that. You know, I've always been, since I was a little kid, by myself. I'm always comfortable alone, creating. Not that I don't get lonely, okay? Not that I don't love people, but I'm okay for hours and hours on end. When I was a kid, drawing. That's why, you know, I've taught a lot of people how to play guitar, particularly. I'm a musician, and I used to give a lot of lessons. And one thing that I noticed is not everybody you're not drawn to something enough, you're not going to concentrate on it enough. So a lot of kids I was telling, even adults, you're not really going to learn how to play guitar yet, you're going to learn how to practice. But that wasn't a problem. I could, when I was getting into the guitar, it went quick. I figured out a lot of things really fast because I could sit there for 4 hours at a time and work at it. So that's an asset, right? That's something I think a lot of people have. I have friends who tragically died of drug overdoses at way too young of an age. And essentially, when I look back on them, I think, man, they had talents, they had skills. If this friend of mine could have been working and building cars at the age of 14, or this friend of mine could have been working on computers at the age of 14 or 15, and wasn't instead going to school and wasting all their time in a classroom being told that they don't fit in and that they're malformed in some way, that they don't know how to behave, that they're stupid, literally stupid because their test scores are this or that. It's really tragic. So there's just something we've built into the world that demands stuff out of us that doesn't really reward anything. It entraps so many people, and it's so spiritually detrimental. You know, it hurts the soul. And that's why there's a lot of hurt and depression out there. And people struggle a lot. That's a digression, but not really. It's what I'm talking about. So our attention. And for me, when I'm the type of person who wants to focus on that, or when I'm talking about a friend who could have just spent hours and hours on end just tinkering with cars and learning mechanics and stuff instead of sitting in school all day. When the world then is designed, okay, we're really going to get into this. The attention economy. It's just this, everything. Our attention is like the crude oil in the earth now, and it's just being extracted from us, right? It's so many different components of it. It's a non-stop bombardment and an assault on us. When I extract our attention, completely keep us diverted and plugged in and distracted, and there's no reward in it at all. We get no value out of it. But a gigantic profit machine has been built off of it. I mean, it's almost as literally as soul-sucking as anything can get. So pernicious. So perverse. That's the stuff we have to talk about. So all of that stuff is holding us back completely from doing almost anything, from loving each other. The story's getting all too typical. But you know, besides the corniness of the name of this show, it's just the getting up every day and facing the reality, because that's exactly what this show's about, the dehumanization. And the whole apparatus around us, this attention economy that I'm talking about, and that and a lot more, the technological society we live in is a vampire. And it can feel like an all-out assault on us especially when all we just want is peace of mind, some time to love each other, some time to be with the people we love. You know, and it's really, really crazy. It's really, really crazy when we look at the technological promises, the promise of the technological society, the promise of all of this open information and everything we've been promised since day one, since the advent of it all, since the machine first hit the scene. The whole story. I mean, this goes back centuries now, since the machine first launched. Our lives are going to be made easier, and one day things are going to be so prosperous and beautiful that human beings are just going to be free to do anything that their hearts please. We're going to be able to pay attention to each other. Our time will be freed up, and we'll be able to concentrate on the things that we're interested in, the things that we love, more time for our hobbies, more time for our loved ones, more time to relax, more time to actually live the life that God gave us. That has always been this promise repeated over and over and over again. And let me just tell you what I'm seeing right now. And it's not cynicism. I don't want to be cynical. That's not what I am. I want to be able to appreciate beauty. That's a far different thing. And when I'm upset that we've allowed it to get this far out of hand, you know, how can I just be captured in this reality and not be, especially when I recognize the beauty of creation. And that's what we need. We need the beauty of creation in our lives to bring us back to life. But listen to this. After all of those promises, even just a few years ago, it was an echoing promise. All of this technology, AI there's going to be no such thing as scarcity anymore. All our time is going to be freed up. And look at this new lingo that's out there right now. What is it? 669, 696 or something? I forget what it is, but it's this new flex, and it's a kick to the balls of everything I was just talking about. Of every single thing I was just talking about. It is the most vacuous flex of all time, and it is a complete betrayal of everything that technology has promised and quote unquote should be. Right? Working 6 days a week. What is it? 6 to 9. Yeah, 669. 6 hours a week from 6 in the morning to 9 o'clock at night. And that's a flex. Hey, I'm going to be real clear about that. Fuck you. That's stupid. Okay? So yeah, I have real feelings too. And I get frustrated. But that's some bullshit. That's not cool. That's everything. That's the reason why we don't have flying cars, Peter Thiel. You want to know why? But seriously, I mean, that's the world we were promised. And I think that the truth is that we're all captured, okay? And we live according to the demands of an increasingly autonomous system of processes. We're being standardized and homogenized. And right now in this podcast, I'm going to break those things down in greater detail. But all of these things hold us back. Okay. The reality is we're all struggling. There's nobody that's perfect, and there's no such thing as being good at life. So the last thing I want to do is create a podcast that tries to tell you that you can be good at life. That life is something that you can optimize. I'm not here to prime you for success in this madness. This is utter madness out here. Do not conform to the patterns of this age. Be transformed by the renewal of your mind. Be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. These are my guideposts. Be the salt of the earth. Be a sheep amongst wolves. Be the light of the world. You'll hear me repeat those things over and over again. That's what I care about. Love thy neighbor, love thy God. But it's really hard to love thy neighbor as you love yourself if you are having a hard time loving yourself, because if you're completely distracted all the time and alienated from yourself due to all the things I'm talking about, that alone, you have a technological reason why you can't get in touch with yourself. The apparatus isn't allowing you to. But we were broken before all of the technology too. That's important. So let me get to that. I'm going to get to that in a minute here. But before I go too far into that, let me just talk a little bit about why am I doing a podcast? Where did it come from? Why, I've talked a little bit about why it's taken me 6 years to do it. But so in 2015, I was in this class at Valparaiso University. So that's a private university in Valparaiso, Indiana, Lutheran school. And the class was Technology is a Writing class. It was a great class for me because throughout my life, besides playing some video game consoles and stuff, I never really used computers. My dad always had computers, but my parents divorced when I was 9 years old, and my mom was just never into it. And that kind of was a big setback for us in school, too, is that just she wasn't getting with the computer thing, and so we didn't. And by the 1990s, man, when I was in high school, like, that was hard. Like, it was already hard to be a student in school then without, like, that kind of thing in your world. And I remember that really frustrating me and my sister a lot, and trying to explain it to my mom, but she was just really flippant about it. Go to the library or something like that. I guess she was right. We should have just done that. But you're teenagers. That's how it goes. We had bigger problems than that, though. So we'll get into that. But for me, it started there. Like, I just wasn't around it a lot at a young age. And as I got older, going back to some of the things I was talking about, I was always just using my hands and my eyes and my brain anyway. So I was kind of really self-contained in my creations and my creating process. So I didn't really need the technological tools. And I think, my time periods in my early 20s and stuff where I didn't have a TV and things like that, I just was working on music all the time, working on art, working on reading and things like that. So all of those things just kind of, not that I was a Luddite, but I really, really started looking at the sociology of technique and our relationship with technology just because I'm curious and I'm looking at everything. So I've been thinking about these things for a really long time. But anyway, I had an anxiety. About, I didn't really know how to use computers. I didn't have a cell phone until, I was really late to the game. Didn't get on social media until my brother was like, look, man, we're in a band. You've got to be a little bit more public facing and you start talking to more people and stuff like that. So get on Facebook and whatever. But yeah, I was always relying on like my brother to do the thing, run the band email. When we went to record, other people were recording, or I never had any recording equipment. So just when I started to get really anxious about it years ago, when the technology was really taking off, when people were able to record things at home, and people were able to launch podcasts and have blogs, I was always kind of like, that's what I need to be doing. That's the way to go now. But I had an anxiety about using the technology. So when I decided, because I dropped out of high school, so when I decided to go back and start the process of maybe getting a degree, and started taking classes at community college, got my GED, and then I ended up private university, right? All of that stuff, got me dialed in. I started using the computers, got my first laptops, And so then I'm in a 400 level Technology is a Writing class eventually, and it gave me the confidence to know just some simple, modest tools can get the job done. And I tested the waters, and then the seed was planted. The seed was planted at Valparaiso University in this class, working on a class project, creating a podcast. So we broke into these little groups, and we made our little podcast episode, just one episode. And that was enough. That planted the seed in my head, which sat there until November of 2019, 6 years ago, exactly. I had a friend named Theo who was just constantly telling me, you need to do this. You need to do a podcast. Let's do one together. I'll help you. We'll do one together. And it just was really hard to figure out. He was just ready to jump into it and go. And I'm like, dude, I have so much stuff in my head. Not that he didn't, but for me, I knew that there was something specific. There was an axis that I was looking for, because it's hard to explain the way I see the world in 2 seconds, and I can't, because part of me is I'm resisting ideology. I'm resisting meta-narratives. I'm resisting those things. I have my faith, and that's what I'm trying to use, and then everything else is based on that. And just to keep it simple, clear as mud. But I knew, and I'm trying to tell my friend Theo, no, there's something I want to do, and I can't put it into words yet. But I started to realize, okay, generally speaking, it's dehumanization. It's the way we treat each other. It's the way we put each other down to feel better about ourselves. And I came to that because I had gotten so far away from myself, and I realized how much and how often I was getting sucked into the world in ways that I just didn't used to get sucked into it. And I also started to realize how unhealthy that was. And I'm talking politics and social media and all that nasty stuff out there. But I really started to draw that line between the projection. Like, so much of that political energy, really, that political energy out there is just pathological. We're working out our deep hurt, our pathologies in this arena that's only making it worse. And I'll get clear about that. We'll talk about that a lot. But anyway, that's how I really started thinking about dehumanization at this little micro level, and how that extends into, atrocities and ideologies of genocide and stuff like that. Also, I have my towering intellectual influences from Hannah Arendt to Jacques Ellul, and people I'll mention and talk about. So, generally speaking, I've been studying propaganda and totalitarian systems and ideologies and how we fall into that stuff. And increasingly more and more over time, I'm tracing it back to our own brokenness, our own pathologies that are passed down generation to generation in the forms of trauma. So, in the big story, in the Judeo-Christian story, that's fallenness and sin and the banishment from the garden. And I want to talk about that too. But essentially, 2019 is when it's like, okay, it hit me. It didn't work out with my friend. We couldn't do the podcast together, but I decided I'm going to do something about dehumanization. And then pretty much a week after that, the Great Rehumanization rings in a bell like my head, and it rings in my head like a bell as I'm laying there 2 a.m. or something in November 2019, and I'm excited about it. And then I jump into it and I start doing it. I think January 2020, I'm making my first episodes or whatever. But yeah, there was something about it, that bad taste in my mouth, that rancid garlic I was talking about. I liked what I was doing, and I still felt this pressing need to do it, but I just couldn't get to it for all those reasons I was talking about. And the other big reason is, too, I was on 5 different psychiatric medications, and I just started making the effort to get off of them around the time I was doing this podcast. And I didn't realize until about 1.5 years ago the extent of the brain fog and the physical stuff I'm dealing with right now to this day. Various different syndromes, right, that are affecting my nervous system. So I've got like referrals to the Cleveland Clinic for genetic neurological testing, for IU, Indiana University's genetics department, stuff like that. I got some weird stuff going on, and we're going to talk about that. Lots of weird stuff. But I can't help but to think, maybe 10 years of being on Wellbutrin, who knows what that did to my nervous system, because they don't know. And a lot of you who are taking these things, I'm finding all the time, don't know. There aren't any clinical studies that show what this does to our bodies for 10 years, let alone, the clinical studies on these medications, they don't exist in the way we need them. We don't have the information we need. We don't know what they do to us. And I was on 5 of them. So in 2019, also around that time, November, I lean over to my partner, Jordan, the mother of my 3 of my children, and I say to her, man, this lithium is erasing me. It's erasing me. So I've always been a really spiritual person, and I started realizing that as I was getting more and more numbed to the spirit, to the beauty in the world, to my own creativity, to my own talents, I was becoming more and more sensitized to the bullshit in the world, to the mechanics of it all. I started taking, whereas I wasn't meditating and praying as much, I was getting more and more political. I lost sight. I stopped looking up and started looking, right in front of me at the nonsense and just getting way too sucked into it. And that was kind of like my warning. I was like, man, I'm not myself. I can't write songs. So I had, in part of doing the podcast, and you'll still hear it in my voice, and hopefully it's getting better over time. It really is, because it's podcasting. I have to be able to talk. But it's been so hard for me to talk, and that's a part of it. And I realized when I went back to, when I started doing the podcast in 2020, and I started making episodes, and I started trying to talk to get stuff out of my head, it was a nightmare. I really, really lost my ability. I lost my tongue. And I look at that in a spiritual sense, like the Holy Spirit was holding my tongue while the medication was just erasing me. But the Holy Spirit didn't. It was like, Martin, and that's another, there's a conviction that's bigger than me. That's like, it's been really important that I take this seriously. And therefore, for whatever reason, I've been slow about doing it, even though the urgency of the Great Rehumanization presses me. It pushes me, right? It's so funny. I want to be open about all these things because it's just really, really stuff we all need to talk about because the trauma is at the heart of it all. Okay, so the limitations, they're not excuses. They cannot be excuses. That's the meat, the material, the fodder for this show. It's the raw material. All right, and so all this stuff informs why I'm doing this. So the Great Rehumanization. I've just been so inhumane. I've been alienated from myself because I've been dehumanized. I felt dehumanized by the medication, felt dehumanized by my relationship with this ongoing, increasingly standardized world that we call civilization, which is more and more this thing chugging along a technological process, just blind, completely blind. I've dehumanized other people, and I started noticing it in the political stuff and the political tensions out there when I was looking at all like vast swaths of my fellow Americans as just being less than me. And so that's the interpersonal dehumanization, because there's two forms of it. And we're going to break those two streams of dehumanization down. But essentially, the most obvious form of it is when we make other people less than us, less human than us, so we can simply treat them badly. Whether that's just in a political argument on a really small level that doesn't seem so damaging. But that stuff coalesces into the larger atrocities. You know, that's the stuff, that's the energy that gets juiced up and activated and becomes the runaway cruelty that unfortunately it feels like it's bubbling up. That's what was the warning. I felt so nasty. Particularly in those spaces on social media with the political stuff and the way we're talking to each other. Every time I put somebody down, I just felt myself shrink even more and more. And then there's also that tug and pull that even though you know that it's nasty, you keep doing it. So I have a lot of things coming up in the next several episodes, and episodes talking about hypocrisy and just really specific. We have to get down to the specific rot at the core of all of this. And that's what this show's set out to do. I don't have the answers, right? But I'm traumatized, and that's the point of it all. So I want to build a project here that doesn't flatter itself with clean solutions. And that can be frustrating too. But I want to be honest. We got to talk about how damaged we are. But all of this public toxicity out there in politics, it starts with private wounds and the household neglect. We talk about kitchen table issues, right, in politics. Those little things that are important to a household that politicians should be talking about, the things that are important to everyday people. But we don't often talk about the dishes being thrown in the kitchen and the slaps and the screaming and the fights and the kids that have to see their parents fighting in the kitchen, or the dad slam his fists on the dinner table and get up and walk away and walk out the door and the door slamming, that kind of stuff. We don't talk about how that seeps into our politics, our jobs at work, and the way we treat the neighbors we're supposed to love as ourselves. You see, that stuff is the fuel for, really, it's all of this horrible stuff going on. It comes down to the brokenness within us. The stuff that we can't manage in our own households behind closed doors. that leads me to a digression, because I really want to put a highlight on this. I really want to underline this and put an exclamation mark on this idea for you. So this is going to be kind of funny. It's going to be kind of gross. This is not for children. But have you seen that they are testing Hitler's DNA? And there's a show right now in Britain on the BBC about it, like a documentary series. And the things that they found out in Hitler's DNA are, well, we can connect this stuff to everything we're talking about right now. So my grandpa used to tell us when we were kids that when they were marching around in Europe during World War II, he's an American soldier, they would sing, Hitler has only got one more, Goering has two but very small, Himmler has something similar, but more of Goebbels as Goebbels had all. Let me give you some background on that a little bit. So Hitler having one ball, you might have heard that. That comes from a prison medical report from when he was in jail from that first rebellion there in Munich in the early mid 1920s. I think 1925 he was in prison and he's writing Mein Kampf. But there's a medical record that talks about how his right testicle didn't descend. Now it gets even more interesting. So there's other accounts. There's like this friend he had when he was a young man. They were roommates at one point, and the roommate has some writings in his diary about Hitler, and one of them is like, I don't think he jerks off. Like, Hitler doesn't masturbate. Some girls like him, but it's not reciprocal. He doesn't pay any interest in them. And my friend, he's really weird. It doesn't seem to have a sexual impulse in his body. There's something going on there. And then there's weird stuff that pops up in writings from people that knew Hitler, from his inner circle and stuff, and just weird stuff about teasing him that he's never been in a bathing suit. You'll never see him swim and things like this. Weird stuff like that. And then there's somebody he was in the army with wrote and saw him naked, wrote that they were like really shocked to see him naked because his genitals were freakishly unformed, like that of an infant's, basically. So, now, that we've had all that conjecture, anecdotal information. But the DNA reveals that he very likely had this syndrome that did all of those things. So, micro penis, but I'm talking like real, they didn't develop really past infancy. Okay? Now, I want to have compassion for somebody, but let's remember Hitler and what he did. And let's be real clear about it. He sacrificed an entire country essentially because he was so ashamed and insecure of his inability to connect with people, in whatever trauma and pathology developed out of that. Think about those frenzied speeches he would give, and firing people up. The raider, the orator, his rhetoric, and how that ignited people. Man, that's like an electrified, suppressed sexuality mixed with shame and such volcanic anger. That this man was obsessed with one thing, and that was his politics and finding a scapegoat to take his pain out on. Even when he's sitting in a chair by himself by a fire in the Eagle's Den or whatever the heck it is, whenever you get a moment by himself, is he really having a beautiful private moment? Is he really relaxing? No, he's just sitting, he's alone, completely alone. I've heard stories about his relationship with Ava, and that's weird stuff too. Really weird stuff. Do you see what I'm saying? When Germany was destroyed and he's down in his bunker, absolutely just this lunatic talking about how 80 million people, the whole German, so you'd think that this guy, the Führer, the father, cared about a country and really loved it. No, there was absolutely not an ounce of love in him. He didn't care about anybody. He sacrificed 80 million people out of his own insecurity. You following me? That is Satan. That's what Satan can do. That's what evil can do with a little puny, insecure man. Satan can drum up that much energy out of that. Our brokenness is the explanation for everything that goes wrong in the world. And we need to get a grip on it. Man, the architecture of grievance. And grievance. When you hear these megalomaniac, totalitarian, these guys, they're just bitching all the time. And they're creating an architecture of grievance. And they're weaponizing it. And they're sacrificing everything, everybody, everything in their path. They hate their own followers. That's all Hitler was doing in his bunker, basically ranting about how much he hated his own countrymen for letting him down because they didn't want to. Let's all go to war. Let's sacrifice the entire nation because you have an infantile micro penis, dude. I'm being serious. It might sound funny. It is kind of funny. I mean, if George Carlin was talking about it, it'd be funny. But even he would be like so angry trying to make it funny. Right? It's so gross. Okay. But that's dehumanization. Every deranged leader that somehow amasses that many people to follow along with them. I mean, that's the activated trauma that's in all of us. I guess what we have to do is start here. So I really believe that our whole story is one of trauma. And if we go back to it, so most of the trauma we can talk about, we can trace back to home, and our families. And a typical example is when a parent abuses a child, right? Or a child loses a parent, a defenseless child without much support or structure or ability to fend for themselves and to rebound from a great disruption in their lives. That's the typical understanding of a trauma, right? But if you think about the Garden of Eden, the story of the garden, that's the same story. It's a rupture. It's the first rupture. So to me, that's a story of trauma and shame. And so sin and trauma are the same thing. They're the flip side of the same coin to me. And when I talk about faith or my personal beliefs, please, I'm not preaching at you. Every single thing that I'm talking about has been delivered to me in the form of a story to give me to the message. So everything I talk about when it comes to faith, or so I'm talking about the Garden of Eden, just understand it as a mechanism to deliver meaning. Everything I say can be a useful metaphor. You don't have to take it literally. Okay. But I have to be honest about who I am. I'm a Christian, and I do have a lot of knowledge in other areas too. I studied Buddhism, and I'll reference a lot of things. I'm a digressor and a referencer. But the Garden of Eden, that's and our banishment from it, that's the first rupture, right? So, God, where have you been? I heard your footsteps, and I heard you coming, so I hid. Because I realized I was naked and I didn't want you to see me. How did you know you were naked? Well, because I ate that fruit you told me not to eat. And then the banishment. So we go from being in God's presence with no shame, and all of a sudden we cannot be in our Father's presence, and we're filled with shame. You see, it's the moment that the nakedness and the vulnerability are met with shame. It's the moment knowledge of good and evil births fear. Okay, that becomes the seedbed of the violence that we've known throughout history. That's the original trauma. It's the same story in all the other traumas we typically know. Shame, banishment. We can no longer be around our own parents, right? Something like that. It's not an ancient curiosity, right? Wisdom is old. Wisdom goes back so far. That's really what this show needs to do, is go back and reclaim wisdom, because this world has no time for it, and we're gonna get back to that and talk about that in a second. But that story, the original trauma, that's the template for how our private wounds become public cruelty. It leads to the first murder, to Cain and Abel. So for believers and non-believers, all of this stuff can function as a metaphor. Okay. There's a primal disturbance there that undergirds all of our social pathology. So I want to use that metaphor to the Garden of Eden to kind of just in a generic way talk about where we're at now in the technological society. So our modern project building, right? the system, everything we're doing, especially the technological. It's kind of like that fruit picking that we got in trouble with in the first place. We're trying to grow our new trees of knowledge, essentially, to recreate paradise, because that longing is still in us. We carry the fallout from having lost the garden, and all of our ideologies are about giving us the answer to get back to some utopia, to fixing all of our problems and all of our disturbances. We feel that longing, and everything. All the ideologies and all the technology promise this coming perfection, from trickle-down economics to communism, which promises the end of classes and class distinctions, technology, endless abundance and surpluses, and the end of scarcity and the freeing of all time. And it's all of these promises that are connected to our longing to the garden. But we're trying to grow our own new trees of knowledge, right? And these platforms, they promise connection, and the algorithms promise efficiency, and the AI promises salvation, But the tools, they're never really neutral. They're never neutral. And what I mean by this, so I'm going to go into another digression here. Recently on Joe Rogan, Elon Musk was on Joe Rogan. Again, pretty recently. And they're talking about where things are headed with AI. And Elon starts talking about a benign scenario in which AI is trained to be curious and foster humanity because of that curiosity. Now, I've got something coming up. Again, so I got things already dialed up after this. And one of those things is I'm going to talk a little bit about this particular conversation within a larger conversation about AI. So, but anyway, I'm going to briefly tap into that right now. So Elon is talking about a benign scenario. What he's doing there is kind of funny, because he's saying, in so many words, well, if all things are equal and the technology is neutral, we'll be able to just teach it the right stuff, and then things will be okay. That's a big if, and even Elon knows that. It's a huge if. In fact, he's kind of talking about that's why he's doing it. It's why he got into AI, because he realized the dangers of it if we didn't do it the right way. He's admitting something there, and it's that he's admitting that the tools are never neutral in practice because they inherit the moral condition of their makers. So Elon knows that we are the ones programming the AI, just like a hammer is meant to either drive in a nail or pull it out. A screwdriver is meant to either tighten in a screw or untighten it, to loosen it, to pull it out. But both of those things can be used for nefarious, reason that you kill somebody with a hammer, right? You can break things with a hammer. A screwdriver can be really dangerous. So a bad person can do things with that. So Elon's kind of looking at the AI as the same type of thing. Well, it's just a neutral tool here, but he also knows that all tools, including a hammer. Now, think about the stakes and how even more true that is for an AI and the large language model that we're programming with Reddit feeds and stuff like that. This, more than anything, AI it's being created in our image. We're created in God's image. This shit is created in our image, but our broken, fallen image, the image of the human being that is banished out into the garden, and that's a huge problem. That's a huge problem, and Elon knows it, okay? He also, I suspect, knows that in this fallen world, technology is it's just another arena for the same old traps, but it makes it worse. So it's not going to extend mercy. It's going to multiply cruelty, because that's what we're doing. It's not going to heal. It's not going to heal us. It's going to numb our conscience. It's going to make us less sensitive. It's going to drain the beauty out of the world, not put more in it. I'm going to talk about that in a second. So I'm just going to say we have to remember something. For me, it's really important as a believer. We are made in the likeness and the image of God. So for that reason alone, dehumanization for me is a sin. It's a sin. I don't want to look at us as a believer. I can't look at us as in a fallen condition. I have to see us in the condition how God intended for us. All right, so for me, everything we do, all we can do is bring the kingdom closer, and the kingdom is not of this world, but everything in this world reinforces the snares that keep us from the kingdom, that keep us in our banishment, our capture. So no matter how much we try to take solace in neutrality, our flesh, we're human, and we can never be neutral. We cannot be neutral. Everything we do is going to have a consequence. And no matter how much our world and the way of living in it is standardized, that's what it is, standardization. That's what we're confusing for progress. That's really big right now. But the spirit resists standardization. The human being resists standardization. Humans are really simple at the lizard brain level, right? The reptile brain, where our amygdala is, our emotions, the unevolved parts of the first parts of the brain that forms, the lizard brain. We have that in us, just this fight or flight kind of stuff. That's the simple stuff in us. And that's the stuff that gets overemphasized in the technological world of processes. It's not the complex stuff that nurtures wisdom. The parts of us, even the suffering, slow-moving parts of us that sense friction, it's out of friction that we learn right and wrong. It's out of tension that we gain wisdom. And technology and standardization seek to level all of that, to flatten complexity, to obliterate nuance, and tragically eliminate context. So we're literally becoming dumber, you see, because we need stimulation. And this isn't the right kind of stimulation that's out there. We have attention economies monetizing cruelty, the worst impulses that we have. So to speak of rehumanizing is to insist that complexity matters more than metrics, right? That context, nuance, and slow reading are not relics, but the oxygen of our dignity. And so I believe we need to relearn the lessons of the garden. Everything we're taught in the world teaches us to forget that lesson when we badly want to create our own paradises. And that's just, it's not going to happen. So anyway, I got the podcast going in 2020. It's taken 6 years. Here I am, you know, I'm here to do that. So let's do it. Let's talk about dehumanization and the two paths of dehumanization. Let's take this home. Let's finish this up, because we got so many cool things coming up. I really do. I'm excited about doing this show now. I know what I'm doing here. I'm ready. Let's just talk about dehumanization a little bit and finish this up. I'll try to be brief, but you know me. I'm going to digress quite a bit, probably. Dehumanization, it comes to us in two brutal layers. We have that interpersonal layer that I've been talking about quite a bit, and then it involves the cheap sleight of hands that we perform to make other people less than human, so we can treat them worse than us. You know, that includes like little comments we make, the contempt we have at the counter when we're paying for something or dealing with a server at a dinner table. But we really see it when we get into a car. So this is gonna be the perfect little segue from the interpersonal stuff to the technological stuff to kind of tie it all together. Because the automobile, man, think about this. Dehumanization. The second we get into a car, we feel like we're superhuman. Our humanity goes out the window. Like we become these superior beings the second we get in the car, and then every other person in a car around us is so subhuman, right? Again, this is one of those things George Carlin could be making really funny, and it is kind of funny, but it's really, really sad. It really, it's not as funny as we think it is. It shows how utterly oblivious we are to how we actually behave, to how we actually operate, to our real relationships with ourselves and the things we're doing in this world. Like who we are in this world can be summed up by what we do in a car. We get into a car, we think we're better than everybody else automatically. And people doing the same things that we do, every time you get on the road, you do something. There's nobody's a perfect driver, but everybody thinks they are. I mean, everything I can say about this situation perfectly sums up every problem we have. You know, you can look into this phenomena of the human being getting into an automobile, and everything else I'm talking about can be seen in this situation. You know, a person that you don't know in a car next to you could be like this person that you get along with better than anybody in the world. They could be your best friend. If you just met them at a bar drinking, you would see them as a human being. You would think they were awesome, but perhaps you have a gun in your glove box compartment or in your center console, and that person flipped you off, and then all of a sudden you shot him, and now you're in prison for the 25 years or something. That shit happens. Man, I'm serious. Like, I walk everywhere and I've never driven. It's crazy. But I see this stuff. I see like old ladies trying to cross the street, and then young men like just, they look at the old lady trying to cross it, and then they speed up to beat the old lady across the street. And then what's up with the turn signal thing? I think that there's this like unspoken thing with people. They think that they're not cool if they hit the turn signal. So they're like, I'll see people and they'll like think about, I can see it in their faces as they're turning the corner, that they think about, I don't want anybody to see me using my turn signal. It's so stupid. I mean, people are so really, when you get into a car, when people get into a car, IQ drops 50 points automatically. So we become dumb, we become cruel, and we forget everything we know about being a human. I'm going to be talking about that a lot in an episode I have coming up called Reflexes Over Reflection. So that's a really big point. The world around us, back to the attention economies and how I'm saying I feel assaulted by this technological society. The world around us does not reward reflection. It does not reward the thinking person. It doesn't reward the good person either. All of the incentives out there reward reaction, emotion, cruelty, and stupidity. So, the next component of dehumanization that we need to talk about, the first one I think is pretty clear. It's how we treat each other. The next component is this technological structural element. It's the systems and the platforms and the processes that are grinding us down. That's what I've been talking about. This shit that values speed and reflex and optimization over reflection, dignity, and context, essentially. So it's not Luddism. I'm not a Luddite. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying we can go back. I'm not get off the grid. I wish. I'd love to do that. I'd love to do that with my family. And you know what? More props to you if you can do that. I know a guy out there, he's a teacher. I think still he lives at home with his family, but he's turning his whole backyard into a farm. That's some awesome stuff. I encourage people to do that and learn from people like that who are willing to teach. I'm not in a spot right now where I can do it. But anyway, I'm not advocating for a whole-scale movement like that. I wish I could. Maybe we'll get there. This is a diagnosis. I'm not a Luddite. I'm not anti-technology. But wisdom is scarce, and technology accelerates behaviors that flatten the complexity and the nuance that we need to become wise, to sharpen wisdom. This technological apparatus that we're being, acclimated to. Propaganda. I study propaganda. Propaganda is all of that phenomena. We think of it as brainwashing, but propaganda is everything out there that is designed to acclimate us to the machine, essentially. To condition us to adapt to the structures that we've created in the world. Clear as mud. I'll explain that later. Anyway, but both strains of this dehumanization feed each other. We're forced to adapt to the processes that make us less humane. So, individual cruelty that I was talking about, the one strain of dehumanization, it finds its expression through the technological systems. The systems that reward that cruelty. Alright, so this show we have to talk about those things, one and the other, show how they go together, and show that it's not abstractions. One of these things is not abstract. These are real things. So the technological rot is the stuff we have to name, and I don't mean it's our relationship with it. So the attention economies that are wasting minds, deep fakes, and instantaneous content that prioritizes novelty over wisdom, slop. And what I really can't stand is that optimization rhetoric, right? It treats people like parameters to be tweaked. And so all this enormous computation, all the data farms and stuff, the human resources that we're using right now to make these trivialities more novel, to just put slop into the world, deep fakes of public figures like Stephen Hawking getting body slammed and stuff. These are algorithmic diets of outrage, the tribal vanity that's being shaped and whipped into a frenzy. I mean, it's crazy stuff. Our entertainment, like our movies and just the content of our entertainment, used to have more subtlety and suggestion in it to keep us more intrigued, to just kind of really stimulate a few brain cells. But man, everything is just getting more crass and obnoxious, more vulgar and more commonplace and more colloquial. It's the idiocracy taking over. So the tragedy of that, there's the long used cog in the machine, right? The cog in the machine idea. This has been around forever. The human being is the cog of the machine. I don't think the tech bros, the people that are actually creating this platform, I don't think they're very super aware of the fact that they are cogs in the machine. You see, because when I was a kid, when I was in elementary school, I could go to the elementary school library and check out a book about the technologies of the future. So there were still books in my library that were written in the 50s and 60s. And according to these books, by the time I was 20 years old, I was born in 1980. So in 2020, there were going to be flying cars. Flying cars, man. Hotels in the ocean. Cities under the ocean. Stuff like that. We were going to be already on the moon with colonies. But flying cars, man, that was a big one. That was in a lot of different books, predictions. We were going to have those by now. We would have had them for a couple decades by now. Why don't we have those things? Because the people that build these things are incentivized to build dumb shit instead. That's the truth. I see Peter Thiel out there like racking his brain over all this stuff, making up all this stuff for why this is going on. It's like, dude, because you guys are locked in too. You're beholden to process. You're not as brilliant as you think you are. You're kind of just like a brilliant technician. You're a brilliant cog in the machine. You're like a more well-oiled, more dialed in, better fitted piece to the evolving mechanism. You're more easily adapted to the process than some other people out here. Like that's what's going on, man. That's what's going on with everybody with the brains to be, solving bigger problems like fixing healthcare and education and all these things that seemingly people don't care. You'd rather build weapons systems and stuff that makes us dumber. That's essentially what's happening. These people would rather just build things that they'd rather build a security state and everything that goes with that, and then steer us towards a future where we're all essentially on feeding tubes with a virtual reality apparatus around our heads, not actually living. We're going to be like plugged into, it's like an episode of Black Mirror. That's really where they're taking us. And they can't even wrap their heads around it themselves. It's madness. But these are not the scapegoats either. Because ultimately, they're just human beings, too. They're trapped. They're fallen. I know how this story ends, even if they don't. But again, you don't have to believe me. You don't have to agree with me. But at least take what I'm saying in some sort of metaphorical sense, because I'm speaking to a real problem. So anyway, what these people are doing is they're just inventing, other new filter bubbles and new ways of hooking us on dopamine. Stunts to monetize attention. And the result is this perversely efficient economy where cruelty converts to clicks and hatred converts to cash. So the tech leaders, we can say this about them. They're not just rich architects of these wonderful job creators. They're architects of a public environment that hyperactivates our worst instincts. That's the problem. Recently, I saw this guy posting the stuff about how wonderful these job creators were. And he was like quoting what their personal value is and then how much money and value they create in the economy. Great. Awesome. That's cool. But again, everything in this fallen, trapped world has a flip side, and sometimes that flip side it is so important that we talk about it and not just brush it under the rug. I think the guy who was making this argument, just an ideological hack, he didn't think deeply about it at all. But yes, of course, yes, job creating, creating value for shareholders. Yes, let's clap. Let's give an applause. But I'm not getting down on my knee and genuflecting. These are not my gods. My God is God. I follow Jesus. I don't follow Sam Altman or Jeff Bezos. They're human beings. And we can applaud what they've created and how they've done things and their ingenuity, and just we can do that. But we also have to say this. We also have to really examine the possibility that these might be the most irresponsible men who have ever lived on the face of the planet throughout history ever. To call them irresponsible is probably one of the biggest understatements ever made. So I have to talk about that. I don't want to create scapegoats out of them. I just want them to be honest. Like, just at the basic level to say, yeah, we have enough money to get away with anything. Murder, we can control countries. All of human history has never seen anything like us. They can at least admit that, instead of being so... One thing that drives me crazy about them is how thin-skinned and insecure they are. If anybody raises their hand, but dude, you got a lot of money. Isn't that a little dangerous? Oh, how dare you? Now, be honest. Just say, yeah, I could probably have you killed and nobody would ever know. Just be honest that human nature and power are a terrible combination. So if I were Elon Musk, I would just at least smile and say, yeah, I'm scary. I get it. I'm a scary dude. I should probably maybe try to make people feel a little bit better about that. Acknowledge it on some level. Because not acknowledging it is just, I'm telling you I have a problem with that, but I'm not going to spend too much time on that. But these dudes, long story short, they're as trapped as we are, even in the technological game. They can't do what they want. They can't invent flying cars. They can't invent anything worthwhile. They're stuck. Satan's got them too. Satan's real. So they've built the platforms that encourage all the scapegoating, all the anonymity-fueled cruelty that we see out there. But the evaporation of context, the flattening of nuance, man, that's making us dumb. And really, guys, stop it. Stop it. That's what I'd say to them. I don't care what else you're doing right now. You're just you're creating the situation we're in. Whew. So the angle I want to take, I don't want it to be too simplistic or smug. So I'm sorry, but I don't want it to be a lecture hall for moral superiority. Again, sometimes it's really hard. It's really hard. So it kept me away. So I want plurality, really. I do. I don't want purity. Plurality is so important. We just don't have any tolerance for it anymore. So we want to talk about how the private and the public and the personal and the political go together. Okay. People's cruelty is older than all these platforms, but the platforms really magnify it and make it worse. Okay. So we need to talk about the cultural diagnosis and how our personal brokenness go together, essentially. Dehumanization causes trauma. Trauma dismisses the human. Traumatized humans dehumanize each other to relieve their trauma, only to further traumatize. And this is the loop we're stuck in, essentially, right? So trauma is the understory of every performance of public evil. The shooter that lashes out. The dude that killed Charlie Kirk. I mean, come on. The politician who weaponizes all this grievance out there, all the hurt that's in us. They themselves are acting from woundedness that's gone unexamined. Like Hitler and his micro penis decides to absolutely unleash hell on his own country, committing genocide. What he ushered into the Soviet. Perhaps Stalin would have never been a brutal well, I'm not saying Stalin would have never been a brutal dictator, but Hitler going and invading and Stalin winning that war and consolidate, that only helped him consolidate power and kill more people eventually. I mean, it's just madness. But anyway, social media does not create pathology from nothing. Okay, that's what I'm saying. It's this brokenness inside us, but it just makes this malice easier to find and easier to justify and easier to monetize. And like when it gets to stuff like Charlie Kirk and that shooting, you know what I mean? Again, let's go back to what I was saying about these tech leaders. All of that is at their feet. It really is. It's the poison marriage between private pain and online ideology. Now, I'm not saying to censor online spaces. That's a different thing. I'm talking about the algorithms that are runaway now at this point. The internet has become this social media. It's all a mirror world now. It amplifies and radicalizes an individual's darkest inclinations. It also creates it's a mirror world. Naomi Klein talks about that. There's 2 Naomi Kleins, so be careful about that. But there's a book. I checked it out from the library and reading it so fast that I need to go get it again. But the mirror world, social media, that's not reality. But it's almost like we live in those spaces as avatars of ourselves, and those avatars become more real than what we're experiencing in our day-to-day lives. It's a dissociation that is so profound and deep. Oh my goodness, the capture is so real. The fall. Our fallen state, guys, it is so real. Our banishment from the garden is real. Oh, boredom. Man, the boredom. Boredom mixed with this attention economy. So the boredom's not trivial. It's the flint that sparks a lot of dehumanizing behavior, right? So when people can't feel the presence of beauty, that's what I'm talking about. That is the utter boredom that the devil loves. That's the devil's playground. When people can't feel the presence of beauty, whether that's the rustle of the leaves and Mozart. Hardly anyone listens to classical music, right? I do. Mozart, man. Dvorak. Shostakovich. Anyway, classical music. The Quiet of Dawn. Your significant other's face. Like, people literally cannot feel beauty anymore. The sunshine. The changing of the season. So we reach for all sorts of stimulants, right? And those attention economies and all of these algorithms are designed to feed off of that. Technological and chemical stimulants. So if our sensory lives are blunted, sorry, I gotta get a drink. Our sensory lives, if they're blunted, right, in any way, if we can't see beauty, then cruelty's gonna bloom. Wonder's going to fade. That curiosity that Elon Musk was talking about, that he says it needs to be in that AI, that's really important. But something really happens to our curiosity when we get desensitized and no longer can see beauty or feel it. Our curiosity just becomes perverse. So it's like we're always going to be curious in a way, and that really needs to be channeled. Boredom, attention, curiosity, it all goes together. So beauty, really, seriously, going back to Dostoevsky and the Idiot, there's a line, I believe beauty will save the world. That's Dostoevsky. That's what I'm saying here. Beauty, it's not a luxury. It's not a luxury. And for too many people in the way we look at this and in the world, and we deprive ourselves and others of beauty, beauty's not a luxury, man. It's a corrective for all this because it brings us back to life, makes us sensitive again. Have you ever noticed that every vision of dystopia, like, and I'm talking every movie, show that I've watched my entire life that showed the future, and it doesn't have to be a dystopia, but dystopic, those visions, those portrayals especially, but every version of the future is a lot more bleak and colorless compared to the world around us right now that we've grown up in. It's there's so little beauty in any portrayal of the future. It's either this like rusty, dark colored, metal looking, sharp cornered, blunted metal, bolted, just dark, you know what I'm saying? Surfaces, darkness with like dim lights hanging. That's like really the dystopia kind of version of the future type template. And then it's like very similar, but it's like everything looks like a washing machine. It's just this white, metallic, shiny, hospital-looking sterility. White, sterile, there's just no beauty in any of these portrayals of the future. So there's no curiosity, and so it's just not a real creative-looking place, right? It doesn't look like it's a place where we're going to be happy at all. It's just bleak. every depiction of our technological future, it's like I was saying earlier, it was supposed to usher in our ability to have more free time to pursue beauty, and yet this 669 shit's a flex. Fuck you again. I'm not impressed. Take that shit and fuck off with it. Like, really. Beauty is important. If that alone, I'll pound the table. Let's keep things beautiful. Make the world beautiful again. God made it beautiful. God made the word beautiful. What are we doing? So basically the podcast is going to run on 2 tracks. We're going to dissect dehumanization and its interpersonal and political expressions, the scapegoating, the ideological ossification, that hardening and corrosive and corroding, the slide from disagreement into denigration and the cruelty, all that stuff. And the other side, we're going to interrogate the technological dehumanization. And in these days that we're in right now, it especially entails how the optimization rhetoric, the AI tools, the algorithms, all this stuff shapes thought and language and moral imagination. And these tracks, they intersect constantly, the 2 tracks we're going to be talking about. Algorithms amplify ideology. Ideology finds welcome hosts in algorithmic echo chambers, right? The goal is not melancholic nostalgia for a past, to be clear. That never existed, right? But we need to salvage as much of what is worth saving as possible. And that means just bringing back the importance of depth, of patience, of slow thought, of rumination, of reflection, the capacity to look long enough at each other, the capacity to look at every person that we know or we see long enough to recognize them as a whole human being. You see? Like Hitler and his that's like he never felt like a full human being. So he put all his time and energy into attacking the world and finding the demons that made him feel the way he did. Because, I mean, really seriously, if you had the knowledge and the history and all this stuff in your head and you read what Hitler actually wrote, it really is just stupid bullshit. Mein Kampf is a dumb book. It's a stupid book. It makes no sense. It's ridiculous. So, anyway, it's literally the ravings of a lunatic, insecure mind that just... And who knows what that energy could have been channeled into if it was real talent. So, although I've always thought that there's too much that's made of Hitler as being a failed artist causing all this, maybe, just maybe, if he grew up in a real nurturing situation and didn't live in a world where having the condition that he apparently had made him feel so less human than everybody else, that whole thing wouldn't have happened. But the devil can use any brokenness, and to use the techno rhetoric, Satan will scale any individual brokenness to match his agenda of tearing us apart, of ruining God's creation. Satan scaled Hitler's insecurities to match his agenda. And look at the fallout and destruction that happened. It's crazy. Crazy to wrap your head around, man. It's nuts. So, yeah. This is the Great Rehumanization. This is what I want to do. I don't know. We might have guests. I'm working on that. I'm trying to put that together. I want things to be funny sometimes, but we're going to have to be blunt at times. Things are going to get messy. We're going to have to We're going to have to tread into, subjects like theology and belief and faith and stuff, because questions about sin, I've already been talking about it, grace and the soul. These are unavoidable topics for many of us. Okay? It's really important that we're just open up plurality. So if you're an atheist, man, come on in. Just look at it all as metaphor. You follow me. Don't get hung up on things. I am going to bring my faith. I'm going to bring my doubts. I'm going to bring my failures. And I'm not going to insist that my lens is universal. Right? So, I don't want any performative righteousness, and I'm trying to avoid that, but I probably will come across that way. I don't really have much of an appetite for domination dressed as piety from anybody. I don't think anybody else does either, but we just keep going in that direction. So I don't want to nourish that. There's no perfect people. There's a Methodist church in Valpo that had that on their side. There are no perfect people. There was a Methodist church in town, and I thought that was awesome. I was also surprised at how many people didn't understand what that meant. But there's no perfect people. We're all prone to the exact same mistakes. The exact same mistakes. Satan doesn't care what political party you are, what church you go to. In fact, Satan is going to go after the people that he hasn't already gotten yet. I think that confuses a lot of people. Like, why would Satan mess with people who already don't believe in God or are already doing stuff like that? So, like, really, hear me on this. Everybody is prone to the same mistakes. All of the Germans that followed Hitler, like, they're regular people. The banality of evil. Hannah Arendt will talk about it. Anyway, I'm gonna make that point over and over and over again and explain it in so many different ways. How we're just all basically alike and all prone to the same mistakes. So I'm aware of my limitations too. And there's days when my attention collapses and you know how it goes. So all I can promise is that I'm gonna be persistent. All right, I'm gonna be honest, and I'm gonna just try to refuse to become slop. So I'll be pushing a lot of other fun stuff out there too, not just audio podcasts. Yeah. So the Great Rehumanization. How I'm gonna handle all that clumsiness and the grandiosity of this name. So if it sounds really grandiose, okay, just the feelings that I was struggling with in launching this, carrying this title around. Just have to remember the cheapness of so much of the stuff that is out there. Okay? It's easier to churn out content than it is to cultivate character. And this is content about cultivating character, so there's going to be this tension always, this paradox always. It's easier to manufacture outrage than it is to risk listening. And this is like slow moving, slow thought. You know, it's easier to monetize cruelty than to pay the slow cost of care. But this is what I'm trying to do. I prefer the slowness, the slow labor. Excuse me, I need to whack my microphone. I prefer a conversation that lasts longer than a headline. All right? And I prefer to risk being corny for the sake of trying something that I think is pretty essential. So this is an invitation, and I want us to be curious. Yes, Elon, we have to foster curiosity. Good point. Impatience is okay. Skepticism is okay. And really, we need to have a greater capacity to be a little bit unsettled. I want us to read more slowly, to listen better, to try to find in each other the parts of the humanity that are worth saving. So I'm not going to promise any tidy answers. Can't do that. There's going to be a lot of contradictions. I'm sure I'm going to have some more false starts with this or that, and probably some embarrassments. We can laugh. I really want to laugh. So that is the kind of slop I want to create. Just something that's funny, but something that has some meaning to it. I'll do that every once in a while. That's a game I will play. You know, but not just completely flippant stuff, but stuff that's just satirical enough. So here's that word again. To reclaim human scale in a world determined to dehumanize us for clicks and cash. Human scale. I hate that language, but really, we have to recognize that humanity is something so much more than just a number, a means. You know, that we're not the means. We cannot be the means. We have to be the ends. We have to be the point. We are the point. We're the point in God's story. And right now, I'm really going to lay into them on this. The tech bros and these guys building their bunkers and stuff. Building their bunkers while they're setting the course for history at the same time simultaneously. There's hardly anything ever... There's nothing more perverse than that. What else are they expounding but a complete theology of exclusion? That alone is satanic. We're gonna create history for everybody, and just in case it doesn't work out, we're gonna make sure we have an exit route. Damn the rest of you. I'm gonna talk about that. That's where I will lay into these guys. That's where we need your help, Elon. If you really want to help, Understand what I just said right there and be honest about it. One of you guys needs to come out and say, I'm willing to stick it out with everybody. Okay, I didn't build a bunker. I know where this could go. So I'm going to use myself as the leverage. So that's where you would put yourself, Elon. You know, when you're talking about the AI and how you were hesitant to do it, but you know you needed to do it, why don't you volunteer to stay here with us when the shit goes down? Because we're going to need you, right? We're going to need all your stuff. Anyway, I'm being real. I'm tired of watching the world trade beauty for speed and nuance for noise, and I'm sick and tired of watching this dehumanization, even though I know it's part of the story. I'm a Christian. I know where this goes. I know there's no neutral territory. But we have an obligation to do what is right, to be good, to be the salt of the earth, to be the light of the world, the sheep amongst wolves, to be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. That means tough-minded. That means open-hearted, honest and compassionate. We will not conform to the patterns of this age. We will not allow ourselves to mistake technological progress with the coming of the kingdom. Being transformed by the renewal of our minds does not mean interfacing with the machine. That would be the ultimate conformity to the patterns of this age. The patterns of the process. You see, we need to cultivate a willingness to listen, the courage to be humane, and the stubborn belief that we can do this, at least. Just learn to be better to one another. Let's do it. The Great Rehumanization. It begins with the words we choose and the attention we give. That's the bottom line. That's where I wrap it up. There's no solution outside of love. Like my friend Jay Blackwell would say, stay up, stay human. And like Dostoevsky would say, don't forget to look up. Do not forget to look up. This is the Great Rehumanization. Thanks for joining me. We're going to be talking about this idea that we can control AI coming up. We're going to be talking about our reflexes over our reflection. I've got a story to tell about my personal life, trauma. I'm going to be talking about my grandmother. Got all sorts of stuff coming up, and it's going to be awesome, and I can't wait to keep it going. This is the Great Rehumanization. Thanks for joining me.
And just lay our weapons down. No, I don't count on the whims of any reckless man. I won't be forced into the darkness where I'll be taught to hate again. Well, I'm no dreamer, I'm wide awake. It's really exhausting to know what we have at stake. I blur distinctions of us and them. I don't know anyone deserving all the blame. I'm the problem, you're the problem. One conclusion can only remain.